Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures podcast. I'm excited about this part 2 episode with Daniel Wilson. He has a PhD in linguistics. In the previous episode, we talk a lot about just why he does what he does to help empower those low resource language communities to get up to speed with the information flow so that they become literate and participate in this global information economy and global practical economic economy so that they can flourish. So I'll refer you back to last week's episode for more information there about Daniel. But today's episode, we talk a lot about why Web3 matters for human flourishing. And we get actually very practical about NFTs, about why enabling access to this new information economy and monetary economy and DeFi and DAOs and NFTs. We do some explainers for those that maybe are new to Web3 about what are these new technological advancements that Daniel and I and many others are very excited about. And then we also talk about his new startup. We talk about different entrepreneurial ventures that he's participating in and cooperating with to collaborate with NGOs, to collaborate with international literacy and development, to make real steps toward helping humans flourishing, to help humans flourish with this Web3 technology. And frankly, that's why this matters, right? This is why I am delighted to have him on again 2 weeks in a row to talk about the connection between Web3 and social impact and global impact around the world. Because at the end of the day, this is why we're doing this, right? At least for me personally, I'm not interested in just pumping the next pump and dump scheme or whatever in the NFT world. None of that really matters. What matters is helping the least of these around the world. And so the more that we can talk about that, the more we can educate people about this, the more that we can provide opportunity and access to this type of technology to help people, the better. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com. There I'll have even more extensive show notes to the things that we talked about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures and it should show up. So with that, please enjoy this part 2 conversation with Daniel Wilson. All right, Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so in the first episode, for those that didn't catch it, I'll refer you back in the show notes to listen to more about Daniel, his background in linguistics, kind of why human language technology is important for human flourishing globally. But in this episode, I really want to dive more into Web3, how Web3 can help humans flourish, especially in the context of these low resource language communities, and kind of what can be done here practically to move the needle in the coming decade. So why don't we just start? Would you mind just telling us about how you got involved in Web3? What's your dive into the Web3 rabbit hole story?
Good, yeah. So I was a little bit later than most. That at least I hear when I watch podcasts like this, right? And so I probably it hit me probably early to mid 2020. And so I bought some of my first crypto. Of course, I had heard about it before that, but found myself in the middle of a pandemic, as all of us did, exploring a little bit more. And I had COVID multiple times, and so those weeks I had it really bad. So those weeks I was just laid up. All I was doing was reading. When I could, but yeah, bought some crypto. And started to, ETH was still pretty affordable in terms of gas fees when the real NFT thing started happening for me. But it was still so what happened was I found myself so I would mint NFTs, I would mint them for my kids, right? They would do something and I would mint them and sell them and stuff. And then I recognized what was possible because I am in the sort of the development world scene, and I realized that there are these incredible digital artists that live in these different, in these different contexts where, $50 would be an absolute game changer. And
Mm.
I see some of these, these images selling for, north of 1 ETH. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I'm like, there's so much opportunity here. So what would prevent some of these other guys that I know that are digital artists that, in places like Bangladesh or in India or these other places, what would prevent them from like getting on here? So I ended up like finding some guys, and they didn't have starting ETH like to cover gas fees. So I sort of like just started like saying, hey, listen, I love your stuff. This is really cool. And I said, I will cover your gas fees. Like, let's get your stuff on here and see if it sells. So let's get it on OpenSea. Let's get it on Mintable. Where else? Where else were we were putting it on Mintable. We're putting it on OpenSea. I did get a foundation invite. But anyway, I created this thing called the surrogate collection, right? Where essentially I was like just offering to host a collection on one of these things and just cover the minting fees for some of these guys, so that when they sold, it would just be like game changing for them, right? And so then I was like, the gas fees started to go up quite a bit. I mean, we sold some of these NFTs, and it was just unbelievable for some of these artists, the amount of money. But then I started like jumping into other chains, and I went on to Tezos of all places, right? And so I started like getting into the Tezos system because the gas fees were nominal there, were just negligible there. And so played around in that, and then of all places, I found, so like DeFi summer was happening, and or had just like finished, or not finished, but like it was past kind of the main part of DeFi summer. And I started like, there was sort of like a copycat happening on Tezos. So like all the same types of things that were done on Ethereum were being tried out in Tezos. And so I started playing around with yield farming and with staking, and like everybody was doing lots of stuff like that on Tezos. And that was fun, and I made some money. It was interesting. And that's where I just got like totally immersed in DeFi. And then I ended up finding out about, what had been happening and all these other like bigger DeFi protocols, different things that were happening. And so, so then I started to mess around with that. And then this thing called BitClout launched. And so I'm part of like, it's part of one of the original cohorts of this, it's called Visualized Value by a guy named Jack Butcher, of just entrepreneurs and, founders, different types of people who are trying to like sell things on the internet. So build once, sell twice is his thing. How do you do that? So he coaches a lot of people, has a lot of amazing content. I was listening to his stuff. He announced that like there's this thing called BitClout, which was really cool. But it's essentially a decentralized social media platform. It's a layer one built for, it's an infinite state application that would be able to handle social and not just financial transactions. And so I started messing around on there, and it had such an incredibly easy onboarding experience. All the other like massive friction things that I encountered, that I worked my way through, this didn't have. It was as easy as signing up for, a social media account. And so once again, through my lens of the developing world, I'm like, okay, this is cool. This could happen. This could work. So I said, I'm going to stay here for a minute. And what was happening was true. There were people joining from Iran and from the Philippines and from Bangladesh and whatever. And I would always like follow their stuff. Like, you can give tips with like crypto. I was doing that with their content. I was just trying to boost them. Everybody gets a creator coin when they launch. So like I was buying up their coins. And it was just, it was monumental to me because I actually live in the country of Georgia, right? And there's a lot of poverty here. It's still a developing country. And, I'm walking, just past some guys like selling, like doing real amazing work, like selling some awesome stuff in like the bazaar. But I know that he only gets a few bucks a day. Right. And then I get a notification on my phone that somebody, like tipped one of my posts that was just about nothing for $50. Right. I got a $50 tip for some stupid post that I made on the internet. And I have a phone and the internet. This guy has a phone and the internet. And the friction is being reduced more and more. I'm like, there's no reason why this could have happened to me and not to him.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going to build. I'm going to build in Web3. Like, this is how it happens. This is the moment. Because $50 sent cross borders to a place like this or any of these other places, like, I mean, so many fees, like through Western Union or through
Yeah.
money, like through mobile, like wallets, through like so many things like that exist right now would just make that literally like super impossible or just super difficult, right? To transfer $50. And it happened in an instant. And I'm like, this space is way too cool, and holds way too much potential for me to ignore it. So I just jumped in with both feet and just started to get involved in all sorts of stuff, like some cool DeFi 2.0 stuff. I mean, I got, like I was exploring stuff with dynamic NFTs and, basically decided to do a startup as well.
Wow. Okay. First of all, that is an incredible story. I mean, it's so vivid. You live in the country of Georgia and you have somebody that you encountered that could have done the same thing that you did, right? You have the same access, the same everything. And that's it. That like encapsulates, I think we're creating, the Web3 community are creating the rails so that we can give access to value creation in this new economy, and then capturing that value without very many people, if any, in the middle to capture that value, which is part of the whole corruption globally anyway. It's so many people taking fees out of the middle that it's making it difficult, especially for artists, especially for different types of entrepreneurs. So, all right, so we just threw a ton of terms out, and most of the audience listening to this podcast, I think, would be familiar with DAOs and NFTs. Maybe not dynamic NFTs. So maybe would you mind, in your own words, just tell us a little bit about like a quick 101, a quick Web3 101. What are blockchains? What are NFTs? Let's start there. What are blockchains and NFTs?
Okay. So blockchains are distributed ledgers, right? So it's just, this ledger is located not anywhere, but everywhere on a whole bunch of computers that are confirming transactions between participants without any, intermediary, right? And so it's verifiable. It's not mutable, and it's preserved forever, and it's a way to, in a trustless way, exchange do transactions with anybody on the internet in a distributed fashion.
Love it. Okay, so then you can trade around tokens. A lot of those tokens are like money, where they're fungible, and one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, no matter kind of where you are in the ledger. But what are NFTs? What are non-fungible tokens?
So non-fungible tokens are sort of they're one of one. So it's a unique digital asset. It represents property on the internet, right? It is real estate, internet real estate that you can own, that you can transfer to other people, but it represents a unique sort of a piece of property that's located on blockchains that you can transfer to and from different people. Okay.
And then maybe later in this episode, we'll talk a little bit about DAOs, but just for a quick definition, right? What is a decentralized autonomous organization? Why is that different in light of the blockchain era?
Well, so it's a way to organize a group of people around a common cause, with a treasury, with access to assets that you can agree upon about how to like move those assets around in a way that doesn't require you to necessarily trust everyone that you're working with, right? So it's cooperation by code that can for a common cause, if you like alliteration, right? It's cooperation by code for a common cause.
Nice. That's actually that's an amazingly succinct definition. Let's get that clip of that and get that around the.
Totally just made it up just now. So.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I have 6, 7, 8, 9 different podcast episodes on DAOs that have but that is the most succinct, I think, beautiful definition I've heard of it. So kudos for that. So all right, now in light of this new technology, and in light of what we talked about in last episode, in terms of your passion for human language technologies to allow more of these low and medium resourced language communities to get access to the global economy, get access to the global information flow, how do you see Web3 affecting change to help these humans flourish?
I think that it will be, I think that it is one of the core pieces of infrastructure that we have needed to bring true equity to every human on Earth.
Mm.
Is a core piece of infrastructure. Like I said, like even like a lot of the payments rails, they depend on institutions that can be corrupted. And when you talk about these low resource languages and these communities that haven't had the opportunities we have, they are oftentimes just absolutely corrupt. Like the people in charge are just notoriously corrupt, and they're able to control everyone's access to prosperity and to flourishing, right? And as we have seen, and history has shown it, that this kind of power and this kind of ability rarely leads to them creating prosperity for all of the people under their authority, right? Usually it's the reverse. And so you have these stories, of people raising saving up their life savings. They get to retirement age. It often doesn't even take until retirement age before the people in power decide all of a sudden that amount you saved up is now worth 1/3 of what it was yesterday. They
Mm.
devalue the currency, and then suddenly what you thought was safe and what you thought was, after you worked so hard for it, and now just the decision of one corrupt person can absolutely wipe that out, right?
Mm.
And there's just and oftentimes in these types of places, institutions that we need in order to lead to the kind of access to prosperity and opportunity, the institutions like banks and stuff aren't like, it's too high risk, right, to go in and offer the kinds of things that we have access to without even thinking about it, right? So that core infrastructure is disincentivized to be in the places that it's needed the most.
Mm.
And so now we have a way of saying, okay, what if it was possible to have access to that opportunity, and that opportunity to access capital, that opportunity, those markets, right, without needing sort of that middle layer. And so yes, maybe corruption will still happen in Web3. I mean, it's
Sure.
going to happen everywhere.
Sure.
But for those people who are like genuinely and are creating just really awesome things that the world needs to know about, they're not left out now. They have access. There's infrastructure that will work for them finally, that can enable them to prosper. So that was really long-winded. Sorry.
No, I love it. I mean, we need to talk more about this because the terms DeFi, DAOs, NFT, tokens, blockchains, metaverse, all of these are thrown out there and talked about sort of in isolation. It's really it's the multidisciplinary nature combined with all the economics, combined with all the game theory, combined with all the business development, like economic development aspects of it. This is why this is such an important and such an exciting field right now. It's a shame that so much attention is put to like the pumping up schemes and the different sort of scams or nefarious or illegal activity that's happening with it, when in reality this is the new future for how we can help billions of people flourish all around the planet and participate in a new global economy. Obviously there's going to be regulatory challenges. That's been rife since the beginning. Obviously governments that can just debase their currencies like that, and they have power, and they are probably not willingly going to give up that power. So there's all kinds of human challenges, but at least we can solve some technological challenges and get satellites all around the world to beam internet down to people so that other internet providers can't block access to information and block access to economic flourishing. Right. This really matters, right? I mean, you're living it. I mean, you are doing the work of trying to bring in and effectually bringing in this new technology to help humans flourish around the world. So can you just tell us, maybe for those who missed the first episode, like what are you doing right now? Maybe with a Web3 lens, but I know it's all integrated. Like, what are you doing right now to kind of help in this world?
Yeah, sure. So I I'm committed to compassionate innovation, right? So I have a consultancy where my job is to pay attention to, places spaces like this,
Mm,
innovations in academia, in
mm,
technology, and make sure that all of these best ideas are reaching the rest of humanity,
mm,
right? And what I've been preoccupied with for the last couple of years, because my background is linguistics, I have a PhD in linguistics. My background kind of put me into the language space, and I mean, it's all well and good for us to talk about this like core, infrastructure that now makes all this stuff possible. But if your language doesn't work online, then you're still left out, right? So if you don't speak a language that works on the internet, then you're still left out. So we need, and we're actively building language technology to enable speakers of small and medium-sized languages to have digital viability, so that they can access, so they can be part of everything that's available online. And so that's one thing that we've been working on for the past several years. And then in Web3 spaces, I'm like I mentioned, we have a startup that is asking ourselves the question of, if money is programmable, um, then what types of problems in the world can be fixed,
mm,
um, in ways that we never thought possible. And
mm.
so this is, and we've got some just, I mean, a new crazy idea hits us almost daily as to what's now possible that wasn't before. I've got a whole different lens looking at the world. Like I was on the train yesterday. I had to call my wife. I'm like, this is crazy. I mean, I know I'm not the only one thinking of this kind of stuff, but I'm looking at, like, in terms of like the amount of waste that exists in the developing world.
Mm,
If like the manufacturers could just print a QR code and put it on these things, and then like somebody scans that QR code and then takes it to a recycling facility, that then once it reaches the actual, once it reaches to the processing plant, right, where it's going to be recycled, at that moment, the two different people, the person who picks it off of the ground, the person who runs the actual, container that collects the recycling stuff, they can each scan it, and then once it receives it at that facility, there's a payout, right? And so each of those things can be completely programmable, right? Manufacturers can actually like set themselves apart from the competition by allocating a certain percentage of their revenue towards incentivizing recycling, right? And then the whole thing is actually programmable. That's all it takes. Just the wallets that touch this piece of plastic. Once it hits the facility, then boom. And all of that information, like you can know. Like imagine getting a pop up. Oh, it made it there. That's awesome, right? And I did 30 of these things, right? There's just like human behavior, incentivizing human behavior when money is programmable is towards good things that allow humanity and the planet to flourish. There are new things that hit us every single day. Um, you can hard code goodness and beauty into how money works now,
mm.
and it's just so yeah.
So many questions around that. Let's reverse engineer this a little bit. How does money flow happen right now to, let's say, the lower resourced communities around the world? Like, what is that?
Mhm.
What does that even look like? What kind of banking infrastructure exists? Like, paint us a picture.
Well, so in the sort of the places that can't access banks, there's some really cool leapfrog technologies where communities are finding a way right now through mobile wallets, like through digital e-wallets,
Mm,
right? And so like Fintech is really doing some cool stuff, enabling some amazing, just amazing innovations. What was it that I heard recently? Yeah, like in Bangladesh right now, I think I heard there are 57,000 uh, retail shops that enable you to convert your mobile money into cash, right? So this is SMS money. So you can
mm,
just text, same way you text, text messages, you can send small amounts of cash to people for business purposes
mm,
or for remittances or something like that, right? And then in order to get actual fiat cash, there are these shops that you can go to that are retail agents that, okay, here's my balance, and they can receive the cash, right? So there's leapfrog technology happening for bankless communities already. But the problem with that is all of the things that make businesses work really well, things like subscriptions that are automated, things like yield bearing instruments, right? So that people can like save some of this money and earn an interest on it, right? That's still not available through things like something as cool as like mobile wallets and mobile. And so like people are finding a way in these spaces, but not anything near what's possible when we have programmable money and when we have Web3 cash flows. So.
That's good. Okay, that's good. That's a good primer. Now, I actually want to ask you the question that you sort of posed to us. What are the cool things you can do with programmatic money, right? If we can program smart contracts to move money around from the context of helping humans flourish in the medium to low resource language communities, what comes to mind? Like that is this for a lot of people, Web3, this is a very confusing space, but this conversation, the listeners and viewers will see why I'm asking this question, because this gets really exciting really fast. What comes to mind?
Okay, so I'll list a few things, right, that we've been thinking about. All right, so you can do, for instance, something called payment staking. Payment staking is where an employer wants to pay someone and decides to send money just a little bit early in order to produce a small amount of yield in a DeFi instrument, right, to cover the cost of any fees and transactions or any other innumerable things that they would want to do with that, right? Exposure to DeFi in the middle of transactions, like for remittances, you could do remittance to earn, right? Everything is something to earn, but for remittances, you could do remittance to earn, right? So you can decide you want to send money to your family across borders, right? And you decide to use a certain, like remittance payments company or something that gives you loyalty tokens for using them, right? And those loyalty tokens can then be used in order to offset the cost of any, remittances that you're paying. Like whether the fees go down, like way down with crypto. I mean, we're talking, I want to say even like the best form of remittances is still around 6 to 8%, for everything that you're sending, right? So for if you want to send $100 to a family member across the board, it's going to cost you between $6 and $8 to do that. Those fees get slashed with crypto, but there are other types of like incentivized behavior where different companies can incentivize you to use them, or you could do a similar type of thing with payment staking. When you're doing remittances, you can do, if you're starting an internet business, what if every time launching your internet business felt like a Yuga Labs mint?
Yeah.
It's possible. This
explain,
is how you do.
Explain what that is for those that aren't familiar with Yuga Labs or what even that means. Can you explain what that means?
They created, Bored Ape Yacht Club, and then not too long ago, they released this other side deeds mint, right, where you get land in the metaverse connected to the Bored Ape Yacht Club, right, and to be part of that whole ecosystem. Okay, well, they destroyed the Ethereum blockchain, right, whenever that mint happened because of the demand, just unbelievable demand, right, and we've grown used to this. This is like, we've grown used to like this mint and everybody trying to get in your Discord, everybody trying to get whitelisted. What if that kind of enthusiasm surrounded the launch of your internet business? This is how you do it. All you do is you take some of your marketing budget, you just take a percentage of your marketing budget or your revenue, and you put it in a treasury. And then what you do is your earliest subscribers, if they subscribe or they buy your product or they subscribe to what you're doing, then they get a time-stamped NFT that represents how early they got in, that pro rata receives distributions from this treasury coming out of your revenue, which means the earliest ones get more airdropped to them over time, to where eventually that NFT is worth more than you paid for the product or for the subscription. It's subscribed to earn, right? Because you're receiving steady airdrops out of a treasury that's designated for that. And all of your early subscribers want other people to know about this because the amount that they get airdropped increases the more people that subscribe. You've solved the cold start problem, right? You don't have, there's no cold start anymore because everyone's begging to get in on the day you launch your company, who likes your product, right? Because of what that, and then that NFT perpetually can receive an airdrop from that designated treasury, and you could sell that NFT.
Right.
If you're done with the product, you sell the NFT that's receiving these continual airdrops. So I'm just saying, incentives being hard coded into money now leads to extraordinary opportunities for anyone, right? For anyone, anywhere that they live. That kind of possibility now exists for anyone with an internet connection whose language works on the internet, right? So we've got to get the people, we got to make sure that some language they speak works on the internet.
Yeah.
They have access to this information and they know what's possible, right? One other thing, because not everyone is going to be interested in starting an internet business, right? And so we think that the Internet of Things, when connected to streaming payments, can also incentivize all sorts of new crazy things, right? So, for instance, right now, appliances manufacturers are incentivized to build products that will break sooner rather than later, right? Because most of their revenue comes from selling another one, right? Another model.
Yep.
Okay. Well, if all of a sudden there's a pay when you use type situation where there's streaming payments, anytime someone uses your appliance, your product, they're incentivized to build something that lasts a very long time to, decrease, so that it helps their bottom line, right? And so now they're incentivized to build products that last a long time. And since many of these things are time-saving devices that are not really available because of the high upfront cost to people in the developing world, things like dishwashers and washing machines and chainsaws and whatever, like things that are time-saving devices that we all enjoy every day, then these types of things, that the upfront cost goes down because it's pay when you use. And now people in the developing world have access to these types of things that can then have a lot of the luxuries that we have that enable us to spend time reading and learning and improving education, these kinds of things. So just saying, like, you're moving incentives around by programming money that could lead to a very, very cool future.
Yeah, that didn't click for me when we talked about this before, but now this makes a lot of sense. You're telling me that this actually will help the developing world to create dishwashers and chainsaws that are built to last, if there was some kind of economic incentive for the pay to use, right? Tell us more about that. Like, what's going on in the developed world that makes that really important, different than what's going on in, say, the United States?
Well, so I mean, if you've, I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I'm sure you've walked about, read some stuff about this or watched some documentary about how the being able to afford a bicycle changed everything, right? Somebody who used to walk, so many miles to get water, or so many miles to take their product to market, right? But then all of a sudden, were able to get a bicycle, and that bicycle shaved just absolutely tons of time off of what it took for them to walk from their field to the market, right? And with that time, then they had the opportunity to read a book about, for instance, energy and how energy works. And from the time that was saved from that bicycle, they had time to read about how electricity works. They put a windmill up, right, to generate enough electricity for a village because of the education that they received, because of the time they saved when they bought a bicycle, right? So, like, now you picture that, you multiply it by innumerable amounts with the amount of time that you save, you introducing time-saving devices into the developing world that gives them time for education that then leads them to understand, what innovation exists out there that solves a local problem that they're having. And so and like you got to go back a few steps and say,
Hmm.
why haven't these things gotten to these places?
Right.
Right. And it's because the initial cost is too high. The distribution is not there. How do we incentivize these things to get to these places? You can incentivize distribution through programmable cash flows. There's a startup waiting once we have streaming payments, which is what our startup is bringing.
Hmm.
Once you have streaming payments, there will be another startup waiting to incentivize building new distribution paths along to different types of communities, right? To open up distribution channels for lots of these types of things, and all of it will just be because we know now that we have new primitives to use to incentivize human behavior in new ways, in positive ways, I think.
So since you mentioned your startup, and clearly your heart is in a place to help the least of these all around the world, tell us about it. What is your new startup? Why does it matter? How do you see it fitting into your world that you're working on?
Yeah, so it's called SmartStream, and it is it's going to be a Web3 startup for Web3 startups, right? And so it's going to bring auto recurring payments and streaming cash flows that is chain agnostic to make all these incentives possible. So I just described to you a lot of different use cases, and I left some of them out. Like for instance, people who want to just do a free trial, right? You know how you feel whenever you you do a 7-day free trial, and then or you really like the thing, and they're like, you get free 7-day trial or whatever, and to get that free trial, they ask you to enter your credit card,
right?
Because you know that they know about you, you're going to forget, and you're going to be charged, and you're going to feel sick, and it's going to whatever. Well, now through programmable cash flows, through streaming payments, you can for pennies an hour, you can do a 7-day trial for pennies an hour, which I would pay to check out a product, right? And then after that part, so it's a win-win. You get more people to check out your product. You don't feel like you're trying to play gotcha, right? They're like, yeah, I'll devote a few pennies an hour to checking out this thing, whatever, and then they're getting more money from that, just small things like this, right? And so we're enabling that we're enabling that in a chain agnostic way to embed into a lot of these different things that I've mentioned. And so right now there's a couple of options that people are trying, but it's way too frictionless. And so we're really paying attention to we essentially want streaming payments to work for the guy who is selling fruit out of the back of his truck, in Nigeria. It has to work for him on his phone. And it's not going to have a browser extension. It's not going to have, a wrapped token. It's not going to have whatever. We're working on ways that will work for all of humanity in frictionless ways to enable streaming payments for all the use cases that I mentioned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have an online presence yet so people can get on a waiting list or learn more about your startup?
Yeah. So you can go to smartstream.app, and all we have there is a white paper at this point. And
cool.
So, we're early enough. You can definitely, put in your email and get on the waiting list and, continue to find out more. But we're still pretty early stage. We received, some equity-free grants to build the MVP. And almost got that done. So
awesome.
Yeah,
we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Okay, all right. So to summarize, maybe even our first part 1 and our part 2 here. Obviously, you're passionate about human language technology and using those technological improvements to help all of these languages not only not become extinct, but to actually participate in a global economy so that the information flow and the economic flow can become real, and we can help all of these humans flourish from a literacy standpoint and from a participate in this economy standpoint.
Yes.
And then in this episode, we talked about how Web3, specifically how DeFi, and we touched on NFTs and kind of the different use cases of NFTs could be combined with the infrastructure, both the literacy and development infrastructure, the internet infrastructure being down from satellite into different devices so they can participate this. Obviously, all the translation that we talked about as a part of it. And this gets really exciting really fast on top of your startup with the streaming payments into IoT devices, all of the waste that might be eliminated. It just intersects with so many exciting things, right? Is there anything you would add to that summary of these last two episodes for what really excites you about the future of Web3?
I'm excited to see more innovation that's driven by compassion. There's this thing called refi that I think we belong into. The guys at Cello, are doing an amazing thing. Paki just did a big write up on this idea and this regenerative finance movement, this refi movement, which is basically, whatever backs your currency. I think there's a quote from this book called Sacred Economics. Whatever backs your currency is what you want to see more of in the world. Whatever your money is what you want to see more of in the world. And we have a unique opportunity now to really pay attention to the potential that we have. We have these new, just fascinating technological pieces, and we have a unique opportunity to align the incentives towards good things. I don't feel like we've done a good job yet of that. First of all, I think there's a lot of friction, way too much friction right now.
Yeah.
And second of all, I mean, we're witnessing some interesting things that are, I think they're mimicking everything that's gone before. So where we who have a lot, who are largely disconnected from people who have a little and have been left out of opportunities, are going to bury our head in ways to make that, like, to get more, regardless of what it happens to anyone else. We're gonna ignore how our behavior could impact negatively the rest of humanity. So I asked myself a question actually during the Other Deeds mint, where gas went up north of 70th, right?
Right. Oh yes.
And I asked myself this question: what startups, what people were building a core piece of infrastructure to help people somewhere, who for that period of time were their work was absolutely decimated if they were building on Ethereum. Like who did they disrupt, and how bad was that? What was the potential downstream impact of that? I don't know. We're early enough in this space, and maybe it was not very significant. But as I'm actively building on blockchains with the hope that this is going to be changing people's lives and futures and providing opportunities for people who have never, accessed global markets for the first time and been able to be a participant here, how much energy and attention and decisions will be made by those of us who are early and have a lot, and what will be the impact downstream. So I'm simultaneously skeptical and crazy fast, like really fascinated by seeing what innovative things we can come up with that leads to human flourishing. So yeah, sorry, that may have been more than you were asking for.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the heart. The more of us that can approach it from this heart, that are approaching it in real ways, with real technologies, with real startups like you're getting after, real nonprofits and NGOs like you're a part of, the better. I mean, let's do more of it. Right?
I agree.
Let's go. So, all right. So for those that want to continue the conversation with you on this, or check out your startup or learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Definitely, go to smartstream.app and put in your email. You can follow and engage with us on Twitter. I'll put both. I'll put my my sort of Web3 pseudonym in the show notes, and put my our SmartStream Twitter as well down there. And would love to engage. Happy for anyone to slide into the DMs, as they say.
Nice. Nice. Well, really appreciate your time, and to be able to do two back-to-back episodes like this. I'm so fired up about this. It gets to the core about why I'm personally excited about Web3, and to know that there are others out there that are also excited about Web3 to take practical action like you're doing. Kudos to you. Really excited to continue these conversations. And again, this has been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me back on.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.